Bond of lightcycleastrology.com, and welcome back to the channel, friends. Today we are taking a look at the astrology that is coming up for us in the new month ahead, February 2024. And I have to say, I am honestly a bit overwhelmed by the astrology that is presenting itself this month. For one, because there are a lot of potent or powerful transits that are happening. And it almost has the feeling of like being maybe 2 months or even more sort of rolled in together, where, you know, each month you're going to have the standout aspects that are really going to be kind of like the focal point of the month. And things sort of maybe build up to that point and coalesce and then begin to mellow out again. But this month, it feels as though we're almost getting a month that is combining, you know, more than its share of those types of energies that are really potent or powerful or extreme, you might say. So I'm wondering if this month of 2024 is going to be one of the main contenders for the biggest astrology of 2024. Time will tell on that in that way, but for me, it's a bit overwhelming. So we're going to take a look at some of the astrology, but because there is so much astrology involved with this month, this is really just going to give us a taste, and I won't be able to cover everything because the video would just be too overwhelming. So what we'll do is just give out the major dates of the astrology that's coming through, and that'll sort of at least key you into when, you know, the tides are rising or falling, as it were. And then if you come back to the channel as the month goes on, of course, we'll dive into specific aspects that come through at that time. And so this video will just be kind of like an overview that helps you, you know, sort of know when things are roughly coinciding and what kind of a month it's shaping up to be as a whole. Before we get into it, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit notifications so you don't miss any videos. Drop some comments in the comment section. I love to see how you guys like the content or are experiencing the astrology. And you can always check out lightcycleastrology.com if you want to get a reading from me. Okay, well, we got lots to cover, so let's just jump right into it. I'm going to pull up the real time clock here, and we will begin the month on February the 5th as Mercury ingresses into the sign of Aquarius. So that is one of the first things that happens in the month that is standing out. And this is standing out, of course, because as Pluto is so immediately just in the very first degree of that sign, as planets all month long, and this is sort of one of the monthly themes, as planets move into Aquarius, they are going to make immediate conjunctions to the planet Pluto. So just one thing that I think is interesting, just in the broad strokes of the whole month, where we have a lot of planets making contact to Pluto. Pluto is a new guest in the sign of Aquarius, right? So Pluto is, you know, we've had a couple of Pluto ingresses over the last year and a half or so, but this time, you know, we're getting a little bit longer of a stay for Pluto. Pluto does leave Aquarius one final time, going back into Capricorn, and then by the beginning of next year will re-enter Aquarius, and there it will stay for 20 years. But this is, to date, this is our longest period where we're going to feel what this is like with Pluto in this new sign. But one of the things that is happening is that previous times where Pluto entered Aquarius, we didn't really get that many planets also traveling through the sign and making contact to Pluto. So the contacts that Pluto has had in Aquarius prior to now have been like aspects being made to Pluto, trines and squares and oppositions and things like that. But now we really get to experience one of the most potent kinds of aspects And in ancient astrology, ancient astrologers didn't even call a conjunction an aspect. They called it an adherence, where there was the commingling or mixing of two archetypal energies together. But it's one of the most potent kinds of contacts that planets make to one another in the sky are these conjunctions or adherences. So we're getting a very potent and powerful taste. You could think of it like before as maybe, getting somebody giving you a little sample or something like that of something that they've made from the kitchen. And you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting, but it's not that big of a taste to really, get the full experience. This is really interesting this month because it's almost like somebody's putting like a like a funnel in your mouth and taking a ladle of the soup that they're making, going, here, have some Pluto and Aquarius, and it's just going down your throat. And it's like, it's pretty, abrasive almost, you might say. So one of the qualities for this month, just in general, is that Pluto and Aquarius, we are going to get to have a full bodied taste experience of what this is like for the first time with these contacts. And this begins as Mercury enters Aquarius. And then we get all of those interesting mercurial, Plutonian kinds of Aquarian archetypal themes that could come up. This isn't long lived, but it definitely gives us our first real taste of this. And with Mercury, of course, you can have things like what is interesting to the mind, or things that you are learning, or types of communication or technology, or even things that have to do with the exchange of money or markets or things like that. So you could definitely have this intensity that is coming through that has that Plutonian Aquarian flavor. With Pluto in the mix, it could be anything from evolution to upheaval to an explosion from the depths that needs to come up and forces its way out. And you could also get things like the evolution, say, of when a snake, probably if you ask the snake, hey, do you want to go through this painful shedding of the skin hole experience so that you can have new skin? Most of us, Pluto represents that part of us that really doesn't want to change because we just get comfortable doing what we're doing and being who we are. But at last, we live in a material universe that is always in the flux of change. And in order to stay relevant or current or not become obsolete, Pluto is like that planet that almost forces you to shed the skin, even though if you had your choice, you would probably not want to do so. So with Mercury here, that could be anything from the paranoia to the exciting experimentation with thoughts, or investigating something very deeply, or something like that. But you're talking obsession, obsessive ideas, paranoia around things happening in society, or with other people around you, or something like that. Now, one thing that Aquarius is a sign that or one way that you could think of Aquarius as a sign archetypally, just in and of itself, is almost like the torchbearer, somebody carrying a light out of a dark cave. We'll get into more of why that is maybe a theme for this sign just in general here, but imagine the mind almost going through that process of like, light is increasing and it's been in darkness, and what new things could come from thinking different ways, or thinking outside of normal societal standards, or what your friends think, or something along those lines. So that's kind of the first tension as we open the month here. Now, if we roll the clock forward to between February the 8th through the 10th, one interesting thing here is that we get the new moon coming through in the sign of Aquarius. And you'll see that the reason why I'm saying between the 8th and the 10th is because on the 8th, now I have the real-time clock set to UK London time, by the way, but on the 8th is when the moon enters Aquarius, and then we'll, of course, make that conjunction to Pluto, and then as time goes on, we'll pass by Mercury and then become new. So sometimes people just say, okay, the actual new moon is on the 9th. But with all of this Aquarian stellium energy happening this month, I think that the new moon energy, it's not going to be just the one single day where, hey, we have a new moon. Okay, now if you notice anything new moonish right now, it's coming on the 9th. I think this is much more likely this month to come through between the 8th and the 10th as the moon is passing by the entire sign. And of course, part of the new moon process is that there is the dying of the old moon and then the rebirth or the marriage between the moon and the sun that brings that new cycle forward. So with the moon entering Aquarius on the 8th, going by Pluto, that sort of transformational energy begins with the process of something transforming, maybe dying out, that last dark moon phase coming through on the 8th, and then the moon becomes new on the 9th, and then, you know, it has to work its way out of Aquarius by the 10th. So I'm using this this range of days to sort of represent that whole process that is probably going to be a little bit more felt, I should imagine. So I didn't want to tell you guys that, oh, the new moon's coming through just on the 9th, because I think it's going to be 2 or 3 days that we really feel this new moon energy this month. And it brings along all of these same themes of like transformation and something new feeling like it's being inseminated at that point, and potentially something that has been, you know, beginning to leave the circumstance, or our minds or our spirit or our soul is sort of maybe letting go or saying goodbye to something else simultaneously. So, of course, lunar phases are very, very subtle. And with these powerful planetary alignments this month, they'll probably be sort of washed out in the background. But be that as it may, it is an important point in the month, I feel. So I wanted to mention it. But let's go on to February the 13th here. Just a few days after the new moon, we are going to get Mars ingressing into the sign of Aquarius now. Now this, and I have to agree with most other content creators who are talking about the astrology of February, this is probably the boiling point of the month, of course. Mars entering Aquarius, changing signs. And this is interesting because on the one hand, Mars loses a high dignity. So Mars, having gone through Capricorn, being exalted, lifted up, loses dignity and immediately makes that conjunction to the god of the underworld, to the god of evolution that forces change, or the god of that which has been suppressed or buried that has finally managed to explode to the surface to release the tension. And of course, Mars being the god of war, the god of action, a god of conflict or fighting or accidents and injury, violence, all of those Marsy kinds of things, you know, I almost probably don't even need to draw out the ways in which this archetypally could manifest, because you just by the description of who these gods are, the god of the underworld and death coming together and marrying the god of war, conflict, disease, difficult situations, misfortune, accidents, injury, violence. You get anything from, you know, you want to be careful not to be in a dark alley in a seedy part of town, because this is when you're going to see, you know, violence or sexual abuse or something like that. So you want to be really, really careful. and make sure that you are not in dangerous places or situations as this time of the month rolls around. You just want to be really observant of, your surroundings and in the situation that you are placing yourself and others in, because I think that that is really important. But all of this energy that has been suppressed is sort of volcanically erupting, and it could have, the mix of anger or violence, or I guess in the best case scenario, it's just simply this very intense feeling that action needs to be taken right now. Now, this is kind of good that this is happening in Aquarius, because we're still talking about Mars being in a Saturn ruled sign, and Saturn tends to do things a bit slower. So if this conjunction was happening in Aries, that would be much different. That would be, much more volatile. So I like that at least you could say there's some temperance, there's some slowness. Mars wants to do something, and there's a lot of energy that is trying to come out right now. And it's very forceful, but at least there's kind of like it's having to work its way out through the frozen, the frozen earth, or in Aquarius and air sign, maybe it's coming down as frozen snow that is a little bit slower to manifest or to well up. So that I like in terms of slowing Mars down a little bit. But be that as it may, of course, this is probably the boiling point of the month. So we see this on the 13th. And then from this point forward in the month, we really just kind of sort of pick up intensity and frequency of aspects coming through. By the 16th, let's roll the real-time clock forward here. And we are going to get, this is really, really interesting. We're going to get Venus now entering the sign of Aquarius. And this is interesting because this is also the moment that the first quarter moon comes through in the sign of Taurus, a Venus ruled sign. So normally for the monthly forecast, I may or may not talk about first quarter moons because they're so subtle that usually the other astrology will drown out those subtle lunar phases in a monthly cycle. But this may stand out a bit more because we have a couple of planets in Taurus that are radical and big dimensionally, with Jupiter and Uranus there. And as the new moon, which tends to represent that moment of crisis or individuation, or of actively wanting to build something new, that the new cycle is getting going, getting its feet under itself, being hosted by Venus, as Venus changes signs and makes that initial contact with Pluto, the god of the underworld. And now we have this interesting mix where is something happening that is more potent, with the moon, because Venus, who is hosting the moon, is going through this intense contact with Pluto. And of course, Mars is still pretty close to Pluto. So Mercury's in there, the sun is in there. Now we have this big, 5-planet stellium in the sign of Aquarius, and the month is really heating up here. But of course, with Venus making that Plutonian contact, you get now the themes of anything from obsessed love. We could see people obsessing over an idealistic form of love, like seeing somebody or somebody that or work with, or something like that, that just captures the mind's imagination of like, that's the perfect ideal that I have. That's what I want for the future. Something that is about desire or passion or sexuality or relationship. There's this whole kind of dimension that is opened up that is obviously transformative, right? Pluto's in the mix. So something is going through the process of kind of a transformation, or a transfiguration might be even a good word for this, because Transfiguration, I love that word for Pluto, and it's one of the key words that sometimes I think about for archetypal Pluto. And transfiguration is a little bit different from transformation. Transfiguration is when something transforms into more of like an ideal, beautiful, aesthetic state, like from a caterpillar to a butterfly, for instance. And most of us would agree that the butterfly is a more beautiful state that emerges after the caterpillar. So it, with Venus, a planet and a goddess of beauty, you wonder if there isn't some interesting way that things that have to do with beauty or love are going through a process of transfiguration, where maybe as a positive, this is something positive developing for relationship, but something in the peripheral has to sort of die out and be shed, so that the new beautiful form of love can emerge, or of passion or desire, or what it is that is ideal to us and that we love. So I think that is interesting. But with Mars so close to Pluto still, it's likely to be very impassioned and carry along a much more forceful, and maybe, like critical feeling, like something needs to be done. It has to be done. There's this way in which, you're not just passively like changing something about relationship. Like things are gonna, blow up a little bit if there is the need for repressed or released energy, or something has to change. So that's definitely an interesting part of the month, where things begin to really, boil or cook or heat up a little bit here. And then we are bringing in the archetype of relationship, love, and Venus. Now, one thing that is really interesting is Venus can often represent the social mood. So outside of just our personal experiences, right? We are all living, of course, in a society, or among, in a collective as an individual. And Venus can represent, on that level, that societal collective level, it can represent kind of the social mood, how people are interacting, and the patterns of those social interactions kind of over the collective, right? So like, for instance, if a big news story comes up and we all sort of react a certain way, and we're engaging on social media in a certain way, and there's like a definite, like, you could say, like the populist movement or something like that people are drawn or attracted to. Venus can represent that naturally. But in the sign of Aquarius, that comes out a lot more, because Aquarius is a sign that is often associated with the collective, or with humanity writ large. And one of the reasons that is, of course, is because Aquarius stands opposite to the sun's temple of Leo. And the sun and Leo both carry that archetypal, quintessential, top of the hierarchy kind of the central one, whether that's the king or the president or the government. It's sort of that top of the hierarchy, and that one that all revolve around, or must look to for leadership, or something like that. So by the very nature of Aquarius being sort of in opposition to that archetype, Aquarius itself then carries the mantle of the collective, because it stands in opposite to the one. And as the light is growing in the sign of Aquarius, out of winter more and more, heading towards the springtime, standing in opposition to the central authority represented by the sun's light. But it's a central authority that has been, because Aquarius is progressing towards spring, and the light is growing. So there's a new light that it carries, a new light coming out of the winter solstice, that where the sun has been reborn, and Aquarius stabilizes that new light, and that new light sort of looks at the light that has been or is currently sort of in charge, and it can go against that, or rebel against that new light. One of the reasons why this is a Saturn ruled sign is there is that Saturnine division or rebellion that is associated with those qualities, right? Where we get the winter, it's still dark, but there's this new light. So by and large, we could look at the astrology for February, of course, on an individual basis, but I think that at times astrology really is useful for looking at how the collective mood is around us in society writ large. And I think that this is almost amplified this month with so many planets in this sign that is associated with the collective. And with Venus, you get an omen here. It's like, okay, there's something changing or going through a transformation with the social values of the collective, right? Or the social mood across the individual nodes of social engagement or news or something like that. And you have, of course, Mercury in the sign of Aquarius, a planet that is signifying things like the media cycle or news, or how information is being exchanged or something along those lines. So you have everybody in the Aquarian party. There's just a lot of stuff happening, societally speaking, with everything from what are the populist movements that we're attracted to that are transforming or being evocative or going against the status quo or something like that, that is maybe being fueled by the information that is, also going through that same kind of bent of emotional, transformation or rebellion. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting month. I am looking forward to seeing what happens after some of these big transits come through, and seeing, what shook out from it. But it's already out there in society. I mean, let's face it, we're already going through some pretty big things. But like, for instance, last night as I was just settling down for going to sleep, I was listening to this video about how there have been a lot of media articles that are advocating for polyamory. And the one that this content creator was talking about, the title of it was something like, is your relationship ready for polyamory? 6 ways you know that is, or something like that, right? So this whole Venus, Mars, Pluto in Aquarius thing, it has all of those nuances to it, where it's like, is the way forward, is the progressive thing to do with relationships or dating, or how men and women relate to each other, or live together, or share households, or are married. What these are all questions that sort of come up. What is, do we hearken back to a golden age, like, say, like the 1950s, where there was this traditional thing that everybody could rely on, and there was this golden age era kind of normalcy? Is that what should be achieved going forward, that will set everything right in the world, that will bring some sense of order, and keep off the craziness of all of the new things that are coming down the line, with everything from AI to sex robots to polyamory? Is the world getting so crazy, and what we really want to do going forward is to obtain what was considered to be kind of like the golden standard of the past. That's something that Saturn can represent in Aquarius, specifically Saturn's daytime sign. Or conversely, you get the other Aquarian motif that tends to come out, which is all that was backwards. Like the 1950s, come on, that's all outdated and outmoded, antiquated. We don't need any of that stuff. What we need to do is be the people that are carrying this new light out of the dark cave that is just, we're keeping the wind away from this new young flame that will become something one day. And that is obviously going to go against everything that has been. So if there has been some traditionalism, we don't need that crap anymore. What we need to do is, enter society as these enlightened, idealistic, new beings that have new forms of relationship. And maybe that involves, everything from technology to, sex AI robots, whatever, polyamory, where it's not two people, it's a community raising children, or whatever forms of society that are represented by that virgining light that is coming forward right now. That's the motif with all of these planets. And that's a big part of this month, even though these trends bring us into the future and are short-lived. Like planets are going to move out of Aquarius and we'll be on down the road, a couple of months from now. But these are the seeds, or these are the places that we see things being born in, right? The planets move on, but still the seed has sprouted in the Aquarian soil, and that plant will grow out of that Aquarian kind of environment, right? And one day it'll fruit. So we see the fruits carrying on beyond this, and this could signify the time where, like, oh yeah, I remember it was beginning 2024 that, we started, society really sort of changed in this direction, around this time or this year or something like that. That's how I'm sort of looking at this, in terms of, yeah, the planets are not long lived in this sign, but this is a real indicator of change at this time, I think, in this Aquarian kind of archetypal way. So I think that is really interesting. All right, let's move on. By February the 19th, we get the sun entering the sign of Pisces. And we are seeing that the sun is now going to head towards a conjunction with Saturn. We'll talk more about that here in a moment. By the 22nd, this is when we see Venus and Mars come together in the sky, and still pretty close to Pluto. And this is also the beginning of this, I don't know how many day period, but it's between let me just put the title up here, between February the 22nd and March the 3rd here. So what is that? 8 plus 3, so 11 days-ish, where Venus and Mars are really close together. They go through this perfected adherence or conjunction. But as this is all happening, they also are beginning to engage Jupiter by square. And they both go through perfected squares to Jupiter. And then I'm including this time period as where the square, either on either side of the square, right, before the perfection or after the perfection by 3 degrees, the engagement range is sort of at play or in play between this period of days here, February 22nd through March the 3rd. So we get this Venus-Mars conjunction energy, and then we get it also in this square to Jupiter. That is a video that deserves its own sort of focus. So we'll just say that you can sort of get the sense of where this is all headed. It still carries that Aquarian energy that is the most pronounced because the planets in Aquarius that are making squares to both Jupiter and Uranus are doing so from the right-hand side of the chart, or the superior position. So those are the ones that are sort of informing what's happening with Jupiter and Uranus. And we'll talk more about that as the month goes on here. Now, by February the 23rd, if we roll the real-time clock forward, we get Mercury entering Pisces. And this is really significant. Although this happens, one time each year, we get Mercury going through the sign of Pisces. Of course, by ancient astrology standards, Mercury doesn't do very well in this sign, right? Mercury is said to be fallen or depressed, and has a double hit of bad dignity, being not only depressed or fallen in this sign by the standards of exaltation and depression, but also it's opposite to one of its own temples of Virgo. So we get not only Mercury fallen and depressed in the sign of Pisces, but we also get Mercury in detriment or exile, you might say. So Mercury is rather like a god of communication that finds itself in a land where it doesn't know the language around it, and Mercury as a god of translation, or interpretation, right, probably doesn't find that a whole lot enjoyable. It's like it's like the expert of language going to a seminar that is spoken in a language, and it's frustrating. It's like, hey, this is what I do. I'm all about language, but I'm finding myself at a loss here. Now, that's frustrating for Mercury for sure. And then depression brings in its own significations of Mercury sort of losing dignity, right? It's like Mercury being humbled, or feeling as though he's not the smartest person in the room. So I guess kind of the image that you get is like a language expert that is normally treated with some kind of high dignity everywhere he goes. Like people go, oh yeah, that's the guy, he's so smart, he knows all these languages and stuff like that. Now that kind of archetypal person, if you will, is sort of humbled, and all of a sudden they don't know the language, and their expertise are not being recognized, and they don't understand what's happening around them, and the language is a different language. It's the language of a foreign country or something like that. So that's kind of the quality that you get with Mercury in Pisces. That happens once a year, so it's not like anything crazy that we haven't had once a year. But this time Mercury goes into this lowly position under combustion to the sun. So not only is Mercury humbled and maybe feeling a little bit out of place, or not having an easy time of things, but Mercury is also almost receiving heat or fire, or getting burned up by authority, or by solar things, right? Mercury is so close to the sun that there's like a heat or some kind of bad treatment that is happening to Mercury on top of that. So that is part of the mix. And what that tells me, when we go back to all of this stuff that's happening in Aquarius, what that tells me is that all of those things that we talked about for the Aquarian archetypal things that have to do with relationships and the force of change in society and things like that, it tells me that by February the 22nd, there's not a whole lot of great communication that is helping any situation out. And in fact, it may be that what communication or information that does try to have a positive impact that is in Jupiter's sign, right? So it's going to try to do something positive or hopeful, but I don't think that it works out so great, and it's not going to save or rescue anything. So that thing where it's like, oh, there's a misunderstanding and everybody's mad, if I could just get across why I did it or what it's about, or if I could just, give this kind of information, then it'll clear it up. That is potentially something that will fall upon deaf ears, or just not have the best outcome, or the outcome that will save or rescue the situation. Now, on the other hand, I could be wrong about that, and maybe something about Mercury being very humble and sort of on his own will bring a humble message. The messenger will be humbly received, and perhaps that does mediate the situation. But it seems, by the combustion of the sun and the dignity status here of Mercury and the things that are happening with volatility in Aquarius, it seems that communication is probably not functional as well as we'd like it to be by this point. So we have to hold out a little bit for things to improve on that front, potentially. Okay, now let's go forward to the full moon that comes through a few days later on February the 24th here. And this is adding to Mercury's whole situation, because the moon that culminates and reaches the climax of the lunar cycle at this moment happens to do so in a Mercury-ruled sign. So it just, I don't want to be a naysayer. I hate to be somebody that's seeing only the negative. And worse, I hope that reading the astrology, and I don't want to give anybody a bad impression of the month and bring them into a negative only kind of pessimistic viewpoint. But when you have the host of the full moon culminating in Mercury's sign, as Mercury is going through such a difficult time, speaks to, things coming to fruition within the month in not so great of a way. I'll just leave it at that. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully there's something or another angle that you could see that with, but it just seems like the moon isn't getting what it wants. The moon in Virgo would like to have this, feel this emotional security with things being prepared for, and things being helpful, and things happening in a helpful way, or trying to be helpful, things sort of being going according to a plan or a preparation, or things being rational and maybe a little bit more tempered or something like that. And those fruits there's an omen that the fruits of the cycle just are trying to be that. But even if they are that, it just somehow doesn't have the outcome that improves things. That's one way that you could look at it. Hopefully I'm wrong about that. Hopefully I love the moon in Virgo. Hopefully that moon comes through and says, hey, I'm here to help. I'm here to bring family together in a helpful way if I can. It's like, hey, can I lend a hand, cleaning out the garage if everybody's upset about the clutter or something like that. Hopefully that does bring it in, but it just seems like a rather difficult full moon, because we have the host of the full moon in such bad shape by this point. But again, time will tell. Okay, well, let's bring the real-time clock forward to the final thing of the month that is really coming in, or coming through. That is on February the 28th here. We are having, and this is really wild, we are having a triple conjunction, you could say, or you could also say a double cazimi, however you want to say that. But let me just get Mercury. There we go. I'm going to take out the other planets so that you can see what I'm talking about here. We'll take out Venus and Mars and Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. No, we need Saturn. Sorry. Okay, there we go. Sorry, my nose is still a little stuffy. Okay, so here we are. We have a triple conjunction with Mercury at 9 degrees of Pisces, the Sun at 9 degrees, and Saturn at 9 degrees. So all three planets are coming together at 9 degrees of Pisces. And as time goes on here, there will be the cazimi between Mercury and the Sun. But if we keep going forward, eventually the Sun and Saturn will also go through a cazimi, and then the Sun passes over Saturn. So that's a pretty big moment when you get two planets being reset by the Sun, a synodic reset with Mercury and the Sun, and also a Saturn synodic reset that happens one time a year annually, but happening all at the same time just after a full moon in Mercury's sign is rather interesting. And then remember that Saturn is the host of all those Aquarian energies, right? Saturn rules the sign of Aquarius, where Venus and Mars still are. So that is a powerful moment that we will dive deeper in, but suffice it to say that you could see the beginning of resolution, I think, with the end of the month here. Things turn that corner and begin to be hopefully moving into a more hopeful space, a Jupiter ruled sign that is signifying, hey, things are beginning to stabilize or change in such a way that there is some glimmer of hope that comes around, as things that have to do with maybe responsibility or duty, such things that Saturn tends to represent, are resetting themselves and are entering kind of a new cycle of responsibility, duty, obligation, practicality, things like that. There could be something that is saying, okay, it's a new day, right? And there's something hopeful to look forward to the future, and let's put in some hard work and work towards something a little bit newer here, and maybe something good will come of all that hard work. Is sort of the feeling that might be coming around by this point. And then Mercury, of course, with the Sun, that cazimi moment where Mercury now is on the other side of being maltreated by the Sun, is going forward and is sort of heading out of all of those difficult, lowly feelings of like being isolated and or alienated in that strange place where communication doesn't work out exactly how you would want it to, or something along those lines. Something is improving and recovering by now, the end of the month here. And then, of course, as planets like Mercury move into Aries, Mercury will pick up dignity, and things will improve from that point forward. But that is the month of February. Lots happening in the month, so I don't even know what to say, except for I hope this gives you a taste about what's to come and prepares you a little bit. And again, on the channel, as the month rolls on, we'll dive into these more specifically on the Mantic Monday episodes that I do. So we'll get deeper into each one of the individual weeks of the month and talk about what some of the archetypal themes could be specifically as we break down the month a little bit further. So hope you guys have enjoyed this, and come back for the channel for more information on the astrology coming through this month in a more specific manner. And I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and drop some comments in the comment section how you liked this and maybe anything that you noticed along the way. That is always fun. And you can always go to lightcycleastrology.com if you want me to do a reading for you. That's a great place to find out how Light Cycle Astrology works with clients, and the cost and schedule and all of that. Okay, well, thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys have a great week. Bye for now.